I always believed that honesty was a strength, that if you just told the truth, worked hard, and kept your head down, life would reward you. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the day I realized honesty could cost you everything. My name's Daniel, and until 6 months ago, I worked as a financial analyst for one of the most respected manufacturing firms in the Midwest. Clean suits, clean books at least that's what I thought. I wasn't some corporate climber or office politician. I didn't schmooze or play the game. I believed the numbers spoke for themselves. I believed integrity mattered. I got the job 3 years ago after leaving a smaller firm that went under during the pandemic. This new role felt like a fresh start. My wife and I had just bought our first home. Our daughter was starting kindergarten, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were safe, stable. I wasn't flashy or the type to draw attention. I just did my job, cleaning up messy spreadsheets, tracking expenses, catching discrepancies before they became problems. The kind of work nobody applauds but everyone depends on. I was that guy. The guy who triple checks everything, who stays late without being asked, who catches the things everyone else misses. Then one Tuesday morning, I caught something. It started with a petty line item buried in an expense report. $7,800 listed as client development, entertainment, harmless enough, until I cracked it against the client records and found no such client existed. No meeting, no contract, no memo, nothing. I flagged it. Sent a polite professional email to my supervisor, our department head. Just doing my job, no response. A week later, another strange entry, then another. Tens of thousands labeled under vague descriptions like vendor outreach, strategy lunches, and consulting support, all routing through the same department Mitch oversaw directly. I brought it up again. This time, face to face. Mitch chuckled, patted me on the back and said, "You've got sharp eyes, Daniel. But some things, you just let slide. Let slide." That's when the sick feeling started creeping in. Like I'd stepped into something rotten and couldn't scrape it off. Still, I didn't stop. I compiled a folder, carefully documented everything, and went to HR, quietly, respectfully. 3 days later, Mitch called me into his office. He didn't even pretend to be polite. No handshake, no greeting. Just sat behind his desk, arms crossed, and said, "You're not a team player." I was stunned. I thought doing the right thing was being a team player. His eyes narrowed. "You made some powerful people uncomfortable. That's a problem." 2 weeks later, I was let go due to restructuring. No warnings, no write-ups, just a cold, signed paper and a security guard waiting by my desk. I walked out of that building in silence, carrying a cardboard box, my head spinning, heart pounding. I wasn't angry yet. I was numb, but that was just the beginning, because I thought I'd lost everything. I hadn't. They just didn't know it yet. The days after I was fired felt like floating in space, disoriented, surreal. I'd been cast out of the only orbit I knew, and everything inside me felt suspended in confusion. I wasn't just jobless, I was gutted. Betrayed by a system I trusted. I remember sitting at the kitchen table that first Monday, watching the sunlight stretch across the hardwood floor like it was marking me. My wife Laura was packing our daughter's lunch while pretending not to look worried, but I could feel it, the silence, the tension. She hadn't said it out loud yet, but I knew what she was thinking. What happened? Why you and I didn't have a clean answer. I replayed the meeting with Mitch over and over in my head, dissecting every word, every pause. "You made powerful people uncomfortable." That phrase kept echoing. What did he mean? Who were these people? And what exactly had I stumbled onto? I couldn't let it go. I wasn't just angry, I was consumed. So I did what I always do when something doesn't make sense. I started digging. That night, after putting my daughter to bed, I pulled out my old company laptop. I hadn't returned it yet. Had been sloppy in the termination process, maybe even intentional. I told myself I was just looking for closure. But deep down, I already knew this wasn't about peace. This was about justice. I started combing through the financial archives I'd backed up, not the public reports, the raw data, the messy back-end files I'd saved out of habit. As I went through them, I began to spot a pattern. Repeated payments to a handful of obscure vendors, RK Solutions, Midwest Strategic Partners, Henson Logistics, companies that, on paper, had been paid hundreds of thousands for consulting or logistics optimization. But none of them had websites, no LinkedIn presence, no public contact information, just P.O. boxes and some vague registration documents filed in tax haven states. It was textbook shell company behavior. My chest tightened. If this was what I thought it was, I hadn't just flagged a few suspicious expenses. I'd pulled a thread tied to something much bigger, something deliberate. Still, I couldn't prove anything yet. I didn't know who was behind the shell companies or where the money was ultimately going. All I had was smoke, no fire. That changed one night. About a week later, I was up past midnight again, hunched over my laptop, when I stumbled across an internal memo I'd forgotten about. It had been flagged in an old Slack thread, an innocuous-looking note from Mitch to the CEO's executive assistant, marked confidential. It wasn't about finances. It was about travel arrangements. But there was one sentence that stopped me cold. Make sure the RK invoice is covered under employee wellness again. Legal says it's safer that way. My stomach dropped. They knew it was sketchy. They weren't being sloppy, they were hiding it in plain sight, reclassifying fraudulent invoices as innocuous budget line items to avoid detection. And legal was in on it. That's when the emotions hit me again hard. Rage, helplessness, a bitter sense of validation. I wasn't paranoid, I wasn't wrong, I was right, and that's why they got rid of me. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling as tears welled in my eyes, not because I was sad, because I was furious. I had devoted myself to that company. I sacrificed weekends, missed holidays, skipped family dinners, all because I believed I was part of something honest, something real, and they threw me out like garbage to protect this. I shut my laptop and stood there in the dark kitchen, shaking. That night I couldn't sleep. I just kept hearing Mitch's voice. You made powerful people uncomfortable. Yeah. Well, maybe it was time to make them really uncomfortable, but I needed more proof, names, dates, something they couldn't bury with end threats or corporate lawyers. So I made a plan. No more tiptoeing, no more hoping someone else would do the right thing if they wanted me out of the way. They'd better make room because I was about to come back into their world louder, smarter, and far less forgiving. I didn't wake up the next morning feeling like a hero. I woke up feeling like a man on the edge, wired, sleep-deprived, but with a fire in my gut that wouldn't go out. I kissed my daughter on the forehead, told Laura I was going to take a walk, and ended up sitting in the parking lot of a nearby coffee shop for 2 hours. Laptop open, phone hot with messages I hadn't answered in days. I wasn't just hunting now, I was preparing for war. I started with RK Solutions. After some deeper digging, I found that all three of the shell vendors, RK Solutions, Midwest Strategic, and Henson Logistics, were registered under the same street address in Delaware. I cross-checked that address against a corporate filing database, and boom, a mail forwarding service. Hundreds of companies headquartered in the same tiny office space, but one of them stood out. Beneath all the red tape, one registration listed a full name, Derek Alton. I froze. Derek wasn't just some faceless accountant or legal shield, he was the CFO of our company, Mitch's old college roommate. I'd seen him at the holiday parties, heard him give those long-winded we're-a-family speeches during quarterly town halls. He was the one signing off on the payments. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just Mitch running a side hustle under the radar. This was systemic, top-down, coordinated. They were laundering company money through these fake firms, repackaging it as legitimate vendor payments, then looping it back into executive bonuses, consulting fees, even private retreats listed under employee development budgets. I found one expense-marked wellness conference in Aspen that, according to flight logs, didn't include a single mid-level employee, just execs and their spouses. They'd built a playground using company funds, and I had just stumbled into the control room. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. I'd been fired because I was a threat to a machine carefully engineered over years, one I was never supposed to question. But now I had names, now I had dollar amounts, now I had dates. I needed allies, but not loud ones, quiet ones, people who wouldn't run back to Mitch or Derek the moment I spoke. So I reached out to Melinda, compliance officer. She had left the company a year before, citing family reasons. But I'd always suspected she got tired of biting her tongue. I messaged her on LinkedIn, vague but honest. Hey Mel, I need to talk. It's about the books. I think I finally understand why you left. She responded in 10 minutes. I was wondering when someone else would notice. I'm in quietly. My next message was to Jared, a tech guy I'd worked with on back-end integrations. He was quirky, smart, and hated authority, which made him perfect. He still had access to archived server logs and could retrieve deleted emails. When I told him what I was working on, his reply was short. I've been waiting for someone to burn it all down. Let's go. And just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. We set up a shared encrypted folder and began compiling everything: emails, vendor payment confirmations, meeting logs, Slack messages, memos, even flight receipts. Jared pulled a full export of Derek's internal communications from 6 months before my firing. That's when we struck gold. In one message, Derek wrote to Mitch, "If Daniel keeps poking around, he's going to find the wellness fund leak. I suggest we cut ties now before he loops in HR." It was dated for days before I was fired. Melinda, meanwhile, forwarded me an old compliance report she had drafted but was told to shelve. It detailed concerns about vendor verification failures and had Mitch's annotations scribbled in the margins: "Don't push this. Exec team will not appreciate the noise." That report never saw the light of day. Until now. The emotional toll of it all wasn't small. Every new piece of evidence made my stomach churn. I kept thinking about the team I left behind, people who trusted the system like I did. People with families, mortgages, dreams, and here these men were, siphoning off the company's lifeblood to finance ski trips, golf memberships, and hush money payments varied as strategic settlements. At night, I'd lie awake beside Laura, listening to her breathe, wondering when I'd have to tell her everything I hadn't yet. Not fully. I wasn't ready to watch the worry in her eyes harden into fear. But I was close. Too close to back out now. The next step had to be careful, clean, loud enough to make an impact, quiet enough to avoid a cover dash-up, so I made one final call to an outside auditing firm, a firm not connected to our company. One Melinda recommended. I told them I had a whistleblower package, one that could affect public shareholders, the board, and possibly trigger SEC scrutiny. They asked for proof. I sent them a taste. Just enough to get attention. 2 days later, I got an email from their forensic accounting lead. This isn't just irregular, it's criminal, we're moving forward. I stared at those words for a long time, and for the first time since I was fired, I smiled, not out of revenge, but because I knew what was coming, and this time, I wasn't just a victim, I was the architect of their reckoning. The morning it all came crashing down wasn't stormy or dark. It was bright. Almost too bright, like the sun had shown up to watch the show. I was sitting in my car in the company's parking lot, just outside the glass-walled lobby where, until a month ago, I had passed through every morning, coffee in one hand, ID badge clipped to my belt. But today, there was no badge, just a sealed manila envelope in my passenger seat, and a fire burning in my chest that no betrayal could smother. Inside that envelope was everything: printed email chains, financial records, flagged transactions, legal memos, flight receipts, internal compliance reports. Server logs are organized, tabbed, and timestamped. The audit firm had reviewed it all. Their report was damning. A formal request for an internal investigation had already been sent to the board of directors, but I wasn't here to drop off paperwork. I was here for the board meeting because none of them knew what made this moment so sweetest, that I wasn't just a fired employee. I still held shares, enough to qualify for attendance at quarterly shareholder meetings, and today's agenda: annual performance review, Q&A with the C-suite. Perfect timing. I straightened my tie, took a deep breath, and walked through the front doors. The receptionist froze as I entered. She remembered me, everyone did. "Daniel," she said, her voice unsure. "I thought I'm here for the shareholder meeting," I said, flashing my ID and my investor credentials. "You're still holding those at 9:30, right?" She swallowed, nodded. "Yes, sir. Conference room B." I smiled. Great. Walking through those halls again felt surreal. Familiar faces passed me with stunned expressions, some whispering, some averting their eyes. But I wasn't here to make them uncomfortable. Not yet. Conference room B was already filling when I arrived. Executives sat in their usual spots, Mitch included, seated smugly at the far end of the table. Derek, the CFO, sat beside him, casually sipping coffee and scrolling through his tablet. They hadn't seen me yet, but when they did, their faces changed. First, surprise. Then confusion, then something called recognition. "Daniel," Mitch said slowly, standing up, "this meeting is for shareholders and stakeholders only." "I know," I interrupted. I reached into my bag, pulled out the envelope, and tossed it onto the center of the table. "I'm both." Silence. The board chair, a woman named Evelyn I'd only met twice, looked up. "What is this?" I turned to face them all. "It's what you've all missed or ignored. Fraud, money laundering, internal corruption, embezzlement, every dirty secret buried under strategic expenses and vendor services. I've documented everything: names, numbers, signatures, including yours." "Derek." Mitch's face turned white. "Now wait a minute," he stammered. "This is highly inappropriate. You're a disgruntled ex-employee." "Disgruntled?" I laughed bitterly. "You fired me for asking questions, for doing my job, for being honest, and you thought that was the end of it." Derek stood slowly. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know about RK Solutions," I snapped. "I know about the Aspen wellness trips. I know about the ghost vendors and the strategic settlements. I know you used company funds to enrich yourselves while laying off departments that were actually making money. I know your signatures are on the payments." Evelyn raised her hand, signaling for silence. She turned to a younger man beside her, legal counsel, judging by his stiff suit and blank expression. "Mr. Daniel, do you have documentation?" I slid the rest of the folder across the table. "Verified and backed by an independent forensic audit. A copy has already been sent to your internal compliance team. Another to the sector." Room froze. You could hear the air conditioning humming. Mitch's hands trembled slightly as he picked up the top sheet. It was his own email, the one where he suggested cutting ties with me. "This is absurd," he said, voice cracking. "He's faking these." "Are you saying your email password was compromised?" I said calmly. "Because that's a whole other legal issue." Derek leaned forward. "You're trying to ruin us." "No," I said, stepping back to "ruined yourselves. I'm just the guy holding up the mirror." Within minutes, the meeting dissolved into chaos. Board members whispering, lawyers making calls, the CEO suddenly looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Evelyn stood again and announced an immediate suspension of Mitch and Derek, pending a full investigation. But I didn't need to stay for the rest. I had done what I came to do. As I walked out, Mitch called after me. "You smug little bastard, you think you've won." I turned around, eyes level. "No, I think I finally did the right thing. And this time, The truth gets to speak louder than your lies. Then I left. No applause. No victory parade. Just the sound of my shoes hitting the tile as I walked into sunlight. My chest lighter than it had been in weeks. For the first time in a long time I felt clean. Because justice was no longer just an idea. It had a name and it was mine. The fallout came fast, and it was brutal. By the end of the week, the company had issued a formal press release confirming an internal financial misconduct investigation. Mitch and Derek were both placed on indefinite leave. Within 2 weeks, both had officially resigned, though word leaked that they were forced out under pressure from the board. But it didn't stop there. The SEC launched a formal probe. I wasn't just a whistleblower. Now I was their primary witness. The audit firm submitted all of my evidence, and I sat for hours of interviews with attorneys and federal investigators. It was grueling, emotional, reliving every lie, every betrayal, every moment I doubted myself, but it was worth it. Articles started popping up in local business papers, then regional ones. Executive embezzlement scandal, Rock's manufacturing. Giant. I watched from my kitchen table as Mitch's smug face appeared on evening news reports. Derek's name trended on LinkedIn for all the wrong reasons. The men who once mocked me behind boardroom doors were now being dragged through the public court of consequence. And for the first time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt heard still. It wasn't all victory. There were nights I couldn't sleep, not from fear anymore, but from the emotional weight of it all. The years I gave, the trust I placed, the people I left behind, good people still trying to figure out who to believe. My name was being cleared, but my heart was still sorting through the damage. Laura held me through the worst of it. One night, I broke down, really broke. I told her everything. From the first expense report I flagged to the moment I walked back into that building with the evidence. She didn't flinch. She just said, "You did what most people would be too afraid to do, and you did it for the right reasons." That hit me hard, because for so long, I wondered if it had all been worth it. The stress, the risk, the isolation. But now, watching the dominoes fall, I began to feel something unfamiliar. Closure. I started getting emails from former co-workers, from other analysts, even from total strangers. "Thank you for standing up. Your courage gave me the push I needed." Thought I was alone. Those words reminded me why I started all this. In the first place, it wasn't about revenge, it was about truth. And while the pain hadn't vanished, it no longer controlled me. I was moving on, not just from a company, but from the shadow of the betrayal that had hung over me like a storm. I wasn't just the guy who got fired anymore. I was the guy who stood up when it mattered most, and that changed everything. 6 months later, my life doesn't look anything like it used to, and thank God for that. I work from home now. I consult independently for a handful of small businesses, real people, honest people who actually want someone who double-checks the books. I help them keep things clean, transparent, accountable. It's the work I used to do in the shadows for people who never appreciated it. Only now, I get to do it with purpose, with freedom. The best part, I choose who I work with. No politics, no manipulation, no Mitch breathing down my neck while funneling bonuses to his buddies. Just good work. Done right, and financially we're okay. Actually, better than okay. I never did this for money. But when the company's board settled with me quietly in out-of-court agreement after the scandal, I received a package large enough to pay off our mortgage, cover our daughter's school for years, and buy us some breathing room we never thought we'd have. But it's not the money that changed me. It's the peace. There's something powerful about waking up without dread in your chest. Something healing about eating dinner with your family without checking your email 10 times. I see my daughter more. I walk her to school most mornings. She holds my hand the whole way. I didn't realize how many moments I was missing until I finally stopped living in fear. The fear that doing the right thing would break me, but it in single quotes it made me. You see, when you're in the middle of something like this, when people you trusted turn on you, when your reputation is questioned, when your integrity is treated like a liability, you start to believe the lie that being a good person doesn't matter, but it does. I learned that real strength isn't loud or cruel. It's quiet. It's staying steady when everything shakes. It's choosing what's right, even when it costs you, especially then. I still have scars. Some days I hear a news report or see a headline and feel my stomach tighten. Some wounds take time, but they don't define me anymore. What defines me now is the decision I made to speak up when I could have walked away. What defines me is the man who stood in a room full of power and didn't blink. What defines me is the peace I've found on the other side of chaos. The world didn't fall apart like I feared. It would. It opened up. And if I could go back, if I had to choose between keeping my job or keeping my soul, I'd do it the same way again. Every single time, because in the end, I didn't lose my career. I found my calling, and that's something no one can ever take away. People think betrayal is loud, a dramatic scene, a knife in the back, a public fall from grace, but it's not. It's quiet. It comes in meetings where no one looks you in the eye, in polite emails that say thank you for your service while erasing your existence. It comes from people you shared coffee with, laughed with, trusted. And that's what makes it cut so deep. But here's what I've learned. Betrayal doesn't break you, it reveals you. It strips away the illusions of loyalty, of fairness, of safety, and shows you exactly who you are when no one's clapping, when no one's watching, when it's just you and the truth. And the truth, it's worth fighting for, because integrity isn't some corporate buzzword. It's a choice you make when it would be easier not to. It's a voice in your gut that says, even if they come for me, I'm not going to lie for them. And when you listen to that voice, even when it costs you, especially when it costs you, you discover something priceless. You don't need their approval. You don't need their power. You just need your name clean, honest. Yours. I've come to believe that real strength isn't about being the loudest person in the room or the one with the biggest title. Real strength is quiet. It's the person who doesn't fold when the pressure mounts, who speaks up when everyone else goes silent, who keeps standing when they try to bury you. If you're in that place right now, confused, hurt, doubting whether doing the right thing is worth it, I see you. And I promise you this, it is. Even when it costs you a paycheck, even when it makes you the enemy in a room full of cowards, even when it leaves you standing alone for a while. The truth may not make you rich, but it will make you free. And in a world full of Mitches and Dereks and fake smiles hiding dirty deals, freedom is the most valuable thing you'll ever own. So hold the line, tell the truth, and when they call you too honest like it's an insult, smile, because they've just told you everything you need to know about them and everything the world needs to know about you.